I would now call Kevin Coughlin to testify. Thank you for being here. Begin when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thanks very much for the opportunity to testify. I'm here serving in my capacity as State Chair of U.S. Term Limits to urge you to favorably report House Joint Resolution 3, and I want to thank Representative Heidi Workman for sponsoring this important measure. In their wisdom, our founders set up a system that accommodates the interest of the people through the states in a variety of ways in different places, and in this particular case, it allowed for amendments of the United States Constitution to be initiated in two ways, one by Congress and one by the states. HJR 3 gives Ohio an opportunity to join with 12 other states in exercising its right to call for an Article 5 convention of the states limited to the issue of congressional term limits. I've not always been a fan of a convention of the states, but number one, the urgency of our situation in our federal government, as well as putting forward a resolution that is narrowly drafted to a single subject, and I would say practically drafted to a single subject that's an 80-20 issue that enjoys the support, the majority support of Republican voters and Democrat voters across the country and across the state, makes it something that is worth pursuing. You've heard from Republican Florida Governor DeSantis and Ohio Democratic Congressman Greg Landsman the arguments for congressional term limits and the overwhelming public support that they enjoy. I do want to take a minute to just give you a little bit of a personal perspective because I did serve here for 4 years in this chamber. In fact, the 46th district, Mr. Chairman, which I don't think is in the same place anymore.
I don't think so at all.
No.
They haven't redrawn me up that way yet.
4 years here in the House before term limits took effect, and then a decade in the Ohio Senate after term limits took effect in the year 2000. And during my time here, I was not a particularly big fan of term limits for all the usual reasons that you all have probably talked about amongst yourselves and heard from many other people. Simply put, after 24 years of a term limit experiment in this state, Ohio's doing just fine. You all seem to be just fine. We have very good leaders. We've had some bad leaders, but the state on the whole has moved forward, has improved, the economy is strong, and the business of policy making continues. Do we miss seasoned and experienced voices in the process? Well, yes, and not really. Each new member brings their own talents and perspective to the legislature, as they should, and the accumulation of knowledge and seniority expands and contracts to the space that is available. If you know you're going to be here for 30 years, you're going to take that long to get effective, or maybe you never will. If you know you're going to be here for a finite time, as I did, knowing every single day that there was where the finish line was, you learn more quickly, you find ways to be effective where you are, and you raise your game. After 2 decades of term limits, our staff and lobbyists running the state? Hardly. If anything, the elected representatives of the people are more assertive and more determined to leave their imprint on public policy. Anyone who's interacted with members of Congress know that they are heavily dependent on staff. That's not going to change with term limits. But the fresh perspective that a member and a shorter runway that they have to work with will ensure that the people's representatives remain firmly in charge of the process. Here in Ohio, over the last several years, we've seen a legislature tackling issues that generations before them have been unable or unwilling to tackle. Indeed, you're doing that now. Term limits embolden our elected officials to solve problems and show results. We need that very much in Congress. Just the sheer scope of the expansion of our federal government, our staggering public debt, and the erosion of congressional authority have all happened on the watch of supposedly experienced and seasoned political class. Term limits will hasten the return to the citizen legislature that the founders intended. And I go back to the first point that I made there. We have over 400 public agencies that are basically making law every single day with very, very little oversight by the only people in town who are directly elected by the people. That's not new. That's been going on for 55 years as Congress has slowly given over its power to the executive branch. This has been done by people who are supposedly seasoned and experienced. So we are asking that Ohio join with other states and use a provision that was very purposely put in the Constitution by our founders to give the people an opportunity to initiate the process of amending our Constitution. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for coming in today and for your testimony and for your years of service to the People's House here in Columbus. Is there any questions for the witness? Representative Gross.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, sir, for being here. I'm going to ask the same question that I asked the bill sponsor when she gave testimony. In Congress in the last 10 years, we have replaced 315 congressmen. The ones that were arguably not replaced were in like 80% Democrat or 80% Republican districts, which, as you know, sir, with percentages is really difficult to change because they're pretty entrenched when their numbers are such. So since the people have replaced congressmen, and I personally have one of the best, that's Congressman Warren Davidson in Ohio. He's a strong conservative who implements and stands for us. I'm just a little bit in question about when we've replaced all of our Congress within the last decade, 10 years, that's 5 terms. The people have done this without term limits. Why now, and why do you believe that that the people are not doing a good enough job at 315 in 10 years, that the government itself, meaning us, we need to step in and tell the people we believe we know better than you do?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Gross, thank you for the question. Obviously, first of all, in the United States Senate, it's 50-50 turnover within the last 10 years. So 50% of the Senate has been there more than 10 years. In the House, your numbers are generally correct. You've got to take into account why these people left. You've got appointments, you've got retirements, you've got a variety. But I look at it from a different lens. Okay, so for the last 10 years, you've had 5 election cycles. You've got 435 members, all seats on the ballot. You've got a third of the Senate. That's 2,340 opportunities to change a member of Congress over the last decade. 315, not a good number. So there's a lot of different ways to look at that. The problem is the people that are hanging on. And as I mentioned before, a lot of the departures that you've seen, and we all know this because they say it on the way out the door, they're frustrated that they can't get anything done. And a lot of the reason they can't get anything done is because you have entrenched, experienced members who are now in positions of power who really have prevented Congress from being able to address the issues that the American people, strongly want addressed and need solved. So again, a return to a citizen legislature with regular turnover, where members have a sense of urgency, I think give the American people a chance to have these problems solved.
Follow up?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Representative Claggett?
Well, that brings up an interesting question. Why not just require the leadership to be removed after 1 or 2 terms?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Claggett, I assume you mean the legislative leadership in each chamber? There are provisions for there are term limits on chairmanship, at least on the Republican side. I do not know that exists on the Democratic side in the House. So in-house rules do provide for a form of leadership term limits. Obviously, the term limits that we're proposing here would impact the legislative leaders equally, along with rank and file members.
Follow up? Representative Troy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Coughlin.
Familiar face.
Yeah, well, yeah. The question I would have here is, the whole idea is we want to limit the amount of time that these people serve, and I always wonder why. If you're going to have open heart surgery, you want someone that's been doing that for 25 years or so. If you want your home remodeled, you're going to look for a reputable contractor that's been doing it for a long time. You're sending your kids to school, you hope they get that teacher that's been doing such a wonderful job there for 20 or 30 years. But when we send people to Washington to make very important decisions that impact our lives, we say, we don't want them to get a lot of experience. We'd like to change them out every once in a while. I guess why is the feeling that this is the place where experience and institutional knowledge really should be secondary to the fact of how long they're there or not there?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, as I mentioned, I think that seniority, that accumulation of knowledge and effectiveness contracts and expands to the space that's available. So if a member knows what their runway is. They're going to figure out how to get there during that time period. But what I would say, I guess a rhetorical question back is, does anybody objectively believe that Congress has been doing a good job? $39 trillion debt, $1 trillion annual interest payment now, the largest single piece of the pie. 434 federal agencies making law every day with zero oversight from Congress or input on whether they're following legislative intent or within their authority, or done fiscal statements or impact statements. I guess if a surgeon's doing a bad job, yeah, limit him.
Follow up?
Oh, yep. Well, I would just think that you mentioned earlier about, more power to the, they've surrendered so much power to the executive branch, and certainly we've seen that the last few weeks. And I do want to compliment Representative Gross's congressperson, because he was one of the people that saw that there was a problem with that recent bill. So, no, I just again think, we have a system of checks and balances that have been there. I mean, and the judicial system, they serve for lifetime appointments. At what point are we going to take this then to the judicial branch and say, okay, we don't want those people hanging around too long either? I guess, again, I really think that this is a solution in search of a problem that doesn't exist. I mean, the good people of Iowa decided to send Senator Grassley back for another 6 years. I mean, that's their call, I guess.
Feel free to respond. If not, we'll go on to Representative
I'll let the
Sims.
statement stand, yeah.
Representative Sims.
Thank you for your testimony today. Do you kind of think maybe part of the challenge is big money's participation in the process? Because I know you served in both the House and the Senate, and so what we tend to see with term limits are people going from one chamber to another chamber, back to the other chamber. How does this help, and will that be a problem there too?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sims, the proposal before you does not prescribe a term limit or terms of term limits. Now, I got to the end of my time in the Senate, and I didn't have a desire to come back to the House. No offense to you. But it was time. It was time to go. It was time to do something different. Unfortunately, a lot of our folks in D.C. don't have that kind of restraint or self-awareness, let's put it that way. But as far as we're not, at U.S. term limits, we're not in the business of prescribing what the term limit package will look like. We want that to develop organically. We're in the business of getting states to put in applications for a convention on term limits, on congressional term limits, one by one. And that's done in the form of a resolution.
Follow up?
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So do we not think voters voting their members out isn't organic?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sims, that's an excellent argument, and one that I held when I sat in your seat for a long time. But the level of crisis, the numbers, the opportunities that we've had, the opportunities that you have every single cycle to replace a member of Congress, and the low number, the high rate of reelection, for a variety of reasons. They've got all the toys. They've got all the tools. They're using taxpayer dollars to campaign. I mean, it's really unbelievable. They get an appropriation to campaign from their office with your dollars, with taxpayer dollars. They've got everything stacked in their favor, and the people are out here saying, "When are you going to solve these problems?" I think the jury's out. I guess everybody's got a very different opinion on whether this is a success in Ohio. But I think that largely, in my opinion, after watching it for 2 decades and having been here, having seen the quality of legislators I served with and the quality of legislators now, seeing the pace of public policy and the issues that are being addressed, I think it is working. It's good to have fresh voices.
Representative Rader?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I don't disagree that it's good to have fresh voices, being a somewhat fresh voice. Thank you for being here, by the way.
Yeah.
But I do want to push back against this jury is out a little bit. I just pulled up a poll from BG saying that our legislature had a negative 34 zero baseline, so a pretty low approval rating this last past election cycle. Also, we had the largest bribery scandal in Ohio history under term limits. I'm just trying to get a sense for how you think that term limits for Congress will eliminate, reduce corruption, or improve approval ratings, and when we're seeing that this is not panning out in Ohio.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Rader, obviously aggregate legislatures, whether they're state or federal, are always, low in the approval ratings. That's the way it is. Of course, everybody likes their member, but they don't like Congress or they don't like the legislature. That's a timeless truism in politics. On the issue of corruption, all I can say is that has to be guided by the restrictions and guidelines and ethical rules that you have in place and the moral leadership and character of individual members who make choices within those rules. This resolution doesn't specifically address that.
Fault. Representative Gross.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you again, sir. Let's go back to the method of how you plan to do term limits is an Article 5 convention. Can you state for certain, that you can limit an Article 5 convention and explain how you could do that?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Representative Gross, obviously from precedent, the article itself has some vagaries to it, as you know. I'm sure you've read it several times. But precedent does not. And we've had court cases on areas that relate to this as far as taking instruction from your state, as far as staying on topic. It seems to me, based on that there's an ironclad rule in this process that you have to, first of all, just in the basic foundation of the process, that the resolutions that come from the different states basically have to be the same language, that they have to ask for the same thing. A resolution coming out of Indiana calling for congressional term limits of 6 years would not join with this resolution and count toward the threshold to create, because you've got that very clear difference. So if you do get 34 states passing these resolutions that are identical, which has never happened, but if you do got that, if you do have that happen, then it is bound to that subject.
Follow up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So on that vein, what is the legal authority to determine whether the state's applications are substantially similar?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Gross, I don't have the legal competency to answer that question, but I suspect that the topic to be discussed and if there are any parameters to that topic have to be the same. I think that there was a previous witness at your last meeting on another piece of legislation that said that there have been 450 resolutions, application resolutions passed for various issues over the history of our country. Ohio's done several as well, but none of them have gotten to the threshold because they're all different.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So if the authors of the Constitution were hesitant to open it back up, which they were in the beginning, why should we be more confident today to open up the Constitution with an Article 5 and risk it, since many in your organization as well as those in your movement state that really this is just a threat to Congress to get them to act on their own behalf, that you really don't want an Article 5. You're just getting enough states so that eventually when we reach that threshold right before the 2/3, Congress will act on its own.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Gross, given the way some of the most recent amendments have gone, that is probably what would happen, is that once Congress sees the drumbeat of 30 or so states getting close to that 34-state threshold, Congress will probably preempt and pass term limits on or put forward to the states a proposed constitutional amendment for ratification. That's what happened with the presidential term limit. First part of your question, I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're
Yeah.
fine. It's okay. Yeah.
I want to answer the first part of your question. I just can't remember it.
Why do you think, since the founding fathers didn't open it up, why
Yeah.
do you feel that it's safe? Because the Article 5 opens up the entire Constitution to do what you're saying.
Right.
So if it's ratified, if you get 2/3, then you risk opening up the entire Constitution for a proposed one subject.
I don't believe you open up the entire Constitution for that. I think that it is bound to deal with one topic. But I will say that the purpose that there was a hot debate after the first Constitutional Convention about opening up again. I wouldn't say that all of the founders didn't want to do it, but I think that the argument, I don't know if it was Hamilton or Madison, the argument that they put forward that that the Bill of Rights, for instance, not going to get this thing done without the Bill of Rights, could be done without a second convention. And I think that was a situational thing in the moment, and I'm sure that the founders weren't saying we never, ever want the people to ever do this again, or else they wouldn't have put Article 5 in the Constitution to begin with.
Representative King.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being with us today. Kind of piggyback on the point that Rep. Gross just made. You know, the U.S. Constitution doesn't include term limits, but yet it was debated by our founding fathers, yet they chose not to put it into the Constitution. So I guess two concerns that I have is the unintended consequences of term limits, that the focus becomes on immediate concerns instead of long-time goals, kind of what your thoughts are on that. And the second is I read statistics that show that the significant portion of Congress members only serve 12 years, which is essentially kind of term limit. So just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on those 2 points.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative King. When you're talking about numbers and proportions of both chambers and everything, I think it's important to note, and we see it right now in real time, how difficult it is to get anything passed. It's not a system that's really designed to have things sail through. It's not as easy as it is here in Columbus. There's a threshold in the Senate that's more than a simple majority. And if you have a close House, as you do in the House, it comes down to a lot of different factors. But that puts a lot of power in the hands of different pockets of people. And I would say that over in my lifetime, that the proportionate, that a huge amount of power has disproportionately been put in the hands of people who are camping out in Congress. I'm not going to get here and demonize Congress or members of Congress. That's not why I'm here. I'm looking at empirical results of Congress and public policy in our country, and the fact that something's not working. That something I think is working here, and it would be good in Congress.
Paul? Yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you. So do you have thoughts as far as the unintended consequences that with term limits, those members might be focused on immediate concerns opposed to maybe long-term goals or solutions?
Mr. Chair, Representative King, I am not, and I'll hold you all up as an example. You are right now in various ways and places wrestling with long-term tax policy issues that are going to have a huge impact on the future of our state long after you're gone. And you're not doing it because in your own self-interest. This is the kind of thinking that we need in Washington, D.C. We need people who are not thinking about their own interest right now. We need some people who are getting to the end of their line and thinking about their legacy and about the future generations of our country.
Thank you, Representative King. Last one will be Representative Workman for this witness.
Thank you, Chair. Thank
Be
you,
nice.
State Director, for being
Yeah.
here. So you are running for Congress, and I wish you all the luck in your campaign. And my question to you is, if you were in that chair now, what do you think the perspective would be for congressmen or Congress as a whole if an Article 5 convention were ever called? And second question, based on that perspective, do you think they would let a convention be called?
The people who are following me can know the number far better than I do, but I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Representative Workman. There's a significant number of members of Congress who are, number one, pledge signers on this issue, who believe in it, many who have sponsored or co-sponsored resolutions calling for it and putting it forward to start the process from that end. So I think that there's a strong sentiment in Congress. However, let's be real. Congress is not going to limit itself unless it has to. And the only people who have the power to put them in that position are the people through the states. It's really important. It's really important to remember that when we talk about the states, we're not talking about government. The founders envisioned the people embodied by the states. For a long time, it was the legislatures that elected our senators, our United States senators. For a long time, it was the legislatures that drew the congressional districts because they embodied the people. This is not about the states versus the federal government. This is the people through the states, as the 10th Amendment reserves powers, exercising their rights on their rights to utilize a tool provided in their very Constitution to change that Constitution. I think self-government is a strength. I think it's one of our superpowers. So, look, do I think that members of Congress are clamoring to do this? No, they're not going to do it until we get close to that 34. But they will. They will, because they're going to, and I'll just practically speaking, they may come up with a pretty liberal term limit. They may grandfather themselves in. You know what? That's fine. It starts the discussion. It creates something that we don't have right now. And if that's the way it goes, it's the way it goes. But in the meantime, in the context of what we're doing here, we have to keep our eye on the possibility of having a convention.
Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.